Heikki Mikkola, also known as the Flying Finn, came from rural beginnings in Finland and pursued a racing career in motocross after finding other sports too dull for him. Born in 1945, Heikki moved to Belgium because that's where the racing action was happening. He lived in an unheated trailer, totally without support, until he impressed Husqvarna enough to hire him to ride a 250 on their team. He finished 14th in 1969 and 4th in 1970 in the 250cc class. Heikki was one of the few Grand Prix riders who could jump back and forth between 250cc and 500cc bikes and win. He's the only rider to win world championships in both classes. In 1974, he beat Roger de Coster for the 500cc World Championship in what was the tightest, no-holds-barred duel in motocross history. In 1977, the Flying Finn continued his winning ways with Yamaha, winning them 2 500cc World Championships before an injury-plagued 1979 saw Heikki retire from racing. The Flying Finn bought a farm and village bakery back home and now lives quietly with his wife and children.
Here's an interview with Heikki Mikkola. Heikki, how did your interest in dirt bikes begin? Heikki's answer, I started riding my friend's motorcycle in the woods near my house. I rode 3 races on it, and after that, I bought it for myself. It was a Greaves. And okay for off-road, but not a true motocross bike. When I started motocross racing, Husqvarna made the best bike in the world at that time. Eventually, I was able to save some money, and then I sold the Greaves to buy a Husqvarna. How did motocross develop from a hobby into racing more seriously? Heikki's answer, even at my very first race, I did well and was happy with my riding. At the same time, I was involved in other sports also, but I had a feeling that motocross was the sport I was best at. My other sports were ski jumping, baseball, and cross-country skiing. When did you realize that motocross could become your profession? Heikki's answer, in the beginning, I only rode for fun. I only raced in Finland, but before long, I was winning everything in my home country. I started thinking about racing the Grand Prix races that were close to Finland. I did that for a couple years before I decided I was ready to race the entire Grand Prix series. Did Husqvarna make you a factory rider and pay you right away? Heikki's answer, no. In my first couple years, I was driving myself to the Grand Prix races. The only money I got from the prize money, I won. In the beginning, it was difficult because I didn't have much money. When I started competing in all the Grand Prix races, I started to do much better, and the factory saw the possibility of me being a world champion. You were racing Huskies when the Japanese brand showed up on the Grand Prix scene. What was that like? Heikki's answer, around 1971 or 72, the Japanese brands came into motocross. First it was Suzuki, and they quickly signed the Belgian riders. They were riding CZs. But Yamaha only signed one rider. That was Swedish rider Heikki Andersson. The Yamaha monoshock was developed in 1972, and Andersson did very well on it. But in 1973, it significantly improved, and on that bike, Andersson was virtually unbeatable. In the beginning, I only rode for fun. I only raced in Finland, but before long, I was winning everything in my home country. Was it hard to accept losing to Andersson's Yamaha monoshock? Heikki's answer is, yes, a little bit. But for the 1974 season, Husqvarna and Suzuki were working extra hard to be competitive. The new Husqvarna had moved up rear shocks. So with all of this being on more or less equal machinery, many times the motos would come down to the last 2 laps. While many of my competitors would be tired, I was not tired. It is true that my bike was not always the best, so I relied on my training in 1974, 1975, and 1976 before I signed with Yamaha, which was likely the best bike I had ever raced. Let's recap your early years in 1973. You won the 250 Inter-AMA Championship. What are your memories of that series? Heikki's answer: I thought that was in 1971, laughing. But yes, that was my first time spending time in America. The tracks were okay and similar to Europe. We traveled everywhere by car. I think Supercross was coming on, but we never saw an actual race.